Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our curriculum meeting. We're hoping that the curriculum committee and any other board members that would join us will come in. But as we said, the staff, they've worked really hard to get this together. So we're going to proceed and try to honor your time. We do want everybody to keep in mind that what today is January the 6th, and I won't get into any political aspects, but we do want everybody to try to remember in your prayers, to try to remember what we want in America is peace, and try to keep that in your prayers. That's all. And tonight we have a special treat for our devotion, and we asked you to just watch the video, and this will be our devotion part. And without further ado, we asked Mr. Cole for us to get us started, and this is our devotion. He has a video.
And you hear the prayer of the children, bending in the shadow of the night. Empty eyes with no more tears to cry, turning heavenward toward the light, crying, Jesus, help me to see the morning light of one more day. But if I should die before I wake, I pray my soul to take. Can you feel the hearts of the children aching for home, for something of their very own, reaching hands with nothing to hold on to, but hope for a better day, a better day. Crying, Jesus, help me to feel the love again in my own land. But if unknown roads lead away from home, give me loving arms, way from harm. Whoa, la da da da. Whoa, whoa, do, 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 la da do. Can you hear the voice of the children softly pleading for silence in their shattered world? Angry guns preach a gospel full of hate, blood of the innocent on their hands, crying, Jesus, help me to feel the sun again upon my face. For when darkness clears, I know you're near, bringing peace again. Doli czujecie, swiedziecie modlitwę. Can you
Thank you. And that is by the Stillwell Quartet, if you would like to hear. They have a lot of music on YouTube and that's the prayer of the children, and I thought that was appropriate. Sometimes we may forget with all the different roles we have why we're here, but it is for the children, and this is why we're here tonight. You know, our children have missed so much instruction, and had a call yesterday are we closing schools? And my answer is no, 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 no. They've missed so much, and I think they're safer in school. Because when they're out of school, they're at Walmart, up and down the road, riding bicycles, going to see Aunt Susie. So my thing is, and I'm not the Board of Education, I'm one person. This is me talking personally. I think they're safer in school. And they certainly need the socialization and they need the instruction. So without further ado, we know they missed school and we know we've taken a hit with test scores and performance. So I think that's why we're here tonight, to get an update. And I yield to the superintendent, and then he can turn it over to whom he would like to.
Madam Chair, thank you for your comments, and we have the same belief that our students are better served in our schools, in our buildings, and we hope that with the help of the Lord, grace of God, we'll be able to continue that and provide a high-quality education. But thank you for your words of support with that. At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Locklear, and you can put this in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Emmanuel, Superintendent Williamson, board members, and of course, all of our district office staff. As you can see, board members, we have quite a few experts here with us tonight. So it gives you an opportunity to ask any questions you may have as it relates to curriculum instruction, because this is what we call the dynamic team. So if we could, Mr. Cole, we'll go straight to the PowerPoint. And while he's pulling that up, I just want the board members to know, and those that are listening out there via YouTube, is that Student Services and CNI have worked diligently, went out to all the high schools along with their feeder schools to share all the data that we've had collected so far this year, based on 2018-19's data with end of course assessments and of course end of grade. So we know that that's going to be our starting baseline for this year. And we have several handouts that we're going to share with you throughout the presentation. And before we get there, we want to thank St. Paul's Elementary for being here tonight. Rex Renner was supposed to be here, but Miss Nikki, all of you know, she is in the hospital. So we called our dear friend, Miss Amanda, to step in, and she and her team are troopers, and they said, we'll do it. Just tell us what we need to do. So Dr. Carr was gracious enough to work that out. So we thank you, St. Paul's Elementary, and we have something special that we're going to present to you later. So we'll go ahead and begin, because tonight we're talking about leading with data in mind, okay? If you have at your desk there should be a handout, and it has a list of all the data. If you have that, Mr. Gray, Dr. May, but it's right here. This is what we shared with the principals at the very beginning of the year. Okay, right there, Doctor. You got it? Oh, you got a copy, okay. I'm sure you got a copy of that also. And I want you to look at all the data points that we have here within the public schools of Robeson County. I think it's about 3 pages, and it covers all departments, human resources, student services, finance, auxiliary services, and CNI. So we have a lot of information at our fingertips that we can help us to guide us every single day when it comes to how can we help the students, okay? So the purpose tonight is to develop a common understanding. When we finish tonight, you'll understand what that common understanding is and how to use multiple sources of data that's going to help us to inform and drive that instruction so that we meet the needs of all students. Not one population of students, but all students. AIG, EC, EL, regular ed, all students, because that's what we do every single day. Next slide, please. So we have Cindy, who is, unfortunately cannot be with us in person, but she is on the, call. And she's going to go over the next 3 slides, I think. So Cindy, are you on? Cindy, go ahead.
Going in and out, and I hope I am not going out, in and out. Good evening from Marietta. I'm down here where there's very little internet connection, but I will do my best to present to you the information and data that we have. This data has also been shared with the principals and with our central office. The first item is the internal review report, which comes to us from DPI, and we placed that in their data notebooks, and we gave them a physical copy of this notebook. They also have this in a digital form in a file in Google Drive. The 2020-2021 comparison result report is also in their notebooks and on the digital drivers, each grade level by school, with their reporting data. The spreadsheet with all the schools provides us with another view of that same data, and it is in their data notebooks that the principals received, and they have it digitally. The graphs per grade level comparisons, we actually did a comparison per grade level and provided the principals and the central office with that information, digitally as well as physically in the notebook. EVOS projections for the 21-2022 year, we do have that, some of that information, but some of the information will come over early this year. They were saying around January, but they have not given us a definite date on that. But that is where you would see your growth reports and your data. And Cole, if you'll move on or transition to the next slide. The data that we do have for the end of course test are your class rosters, and this provides scale scores and grades for our teachers. We produce that out of the central office and provide our teachers with a copy of this. They have goal sub-score summary rosters, and that provides them with the domain and the state comparison with how we look as compared to the state. We have an achievement level frequency report, which is the percentage of students per performance level, and it gives us that information on where we stand with our level 3s and 4s, as well as our level 3s and 4s and 5s, as well as our level 4s and 5s. And then the individual student reports. And what is unique about the individual student reports this year, we've always give them out in paper format, but they are now going to be pushed out through PowerSchool. So parents will be able to obtain them digitally. North Carolina check-in data, you'll receive the same, or teachers and principals will receive the same reports. Class rosters provides the number of items attempted and the number or percent correct, which is different than proficiency. It just provides them with a percent correct, so it doesn't indicate that they'll be proficient later on. Class subscore rosters, it does provide them with how each student performed on each domain. The class item reports, which you'll see in a few minutes, is a detailed report on how each student performed on each item on that check-in. And that's kind of what we call the holy grail for our department, because it goes and digs deep into the data. And of course, we also have the individual student reports, and those also will be pushed out through PowerSchool. If you'll go to the next slide, Cole. This is an example of what our teachers get when they are looking at the class item report. And you can notice we have taken the student's name over where you see the black indicator. That's where the student's name is, and it provides you with all of the information that you see. It gives you the item number on the test. It gives you the content standard. It gives you the content standard percent correct for that entire content standard. And then it looks at the depth of knowledge of the question, the class percent correct, the school percent correct, whether it's calculator inactive if it's a math test, or whether it's not, and then the correct answer. And down in the bottom part where the student's name is, it will provide you with the answer that the student gave and tell you whether it is correct or incorrect. What our teachers can do with this is they can review each check-in by this document. So they actually can go into the check-in test and review it for a period of about 2 to 3 weeks after that check-in, and review it with the students and look at the actual items and how the child answered that item and why. They can have that conversation with the child as to why they answered that way and correct their answers. Not going to change a test score, but it does give them the benefit of looking at what they did wrong and correcting that mistake. And if you will transition to the next, I believe that will turn it over to Wendy.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ms. Sandy. So do we have any questions from our board members? As it relates to the data, what the schools have, teachers have access to, individual reports? Dr. Emanuel?
I don't have a question, I have a statement. That depth of knowledge, that's powerful. If the teacher or whomever helping the teacher, if they would just look at that and say, okay, my kids are just touching the surface. They're not understanding, levels of learning with this depth of knowledge. That is a powerful piece for teachers right there. But they first themselves, they have to understand the depth of knowledge and what that entails. So I know just hearing some teachers talk that the staff, they've exposed teachers to depth of knowledge. Of course, it's been around 200 years, but I think they've been reintroduced to it, and principals know that. But that, to me, that's powerful right there. If they would just look at that and dwell on that and teach and reteach and revisit that and keep reviewing that, that's powerful.
And Dr. Emanuel, the team put together an updated depth of knowledge chart that we've purchased for each classroom, Mr. Davis. It's each classroom. So your regular ed, your itinerant teachers, every classroom is going to have a depth of knowledge chart. And then when the supervisors and the team write those CFAs, the common formative assessments, they look at those depth of knowledge, and we've asked them, to look at 2, 3, 4s, stay away from those 1s, So, we've gotten a little pushback, they're too hard, and, but you know what? Come EOG, DOC, and we're getting ready to take the EOC in a couple weeks for the high schools. Most of those questions are going to be what? 3s and 4s, the test. So, and that's why we want to make sure our kids are exposed to those depth of knowledge questions that's going to, help them on the EOC and the EOG. So, any other questions?
Dr. Robert, Dr. Emanuel, everyone else, I would just like to say these reports are immediate. The report that you see, that class item report, teachers can pull that up and NC test immediately, almost the very next day, and start reviewing with our kids. So this is not something that is, held up in our office. Our teachers have immediate access to it, so they can get to reviewing and looking at those depth of knowledge questions.
Dr.
Which
Robert,
is new for our
I apologize, Dr. Emanuel, we should have said this before we started. You received, and the board members received an example of every one of those reports that Cindy talked about. And you also received an updated version of where we currently stand with our check-in scores. So you can look at that and you can see the comparison of where we stand right now as a county. And you can take those examples we gave you and look at them and see how those teachers use that data.
Thank you.
Dr. Dorsey.
So we know check-ins and all of those pieces are one piece of data that we use, and EOGs and all those other assessments. But what we talked about is how do we use all the different data sources together and think about what that really means for our students. So one of the pieces of data that we also collect because of students' additional needs due to either learning loss or just gaps that have occurred over different times is Classworks. So what you'll see, can you go back to the PowerPoint first? I'm sorry. And click one slide. What I have given you that we're going to use to look at some of the Classworks data and try to talk about it is you have a chart that says Classworks Universal Screener Cut Scores. We're going to use this throughout the discussion. So if you want to pull that out to kind of help some of the discussion before we get into Classworks and look at what does it really provide and why do we look at it in addition to the other data. So can you pull up Classworks for us? So in Classworks, there's many different ways to look at the data. One of the ways that we look at is how do they perform on that universal screener? So they took it at the beginning of the year, but then they also are currently taking the middle of the year assessment. So if you'll see right there where it says, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get a little closer, current placement, this relates back to where is the student currently performing. So as we've talked in a previous meeting, this gives us how many students are at risk of being tier 3 or needing intense intervention. Tier 2, which is that yellow or supplemental. And then green is they're on grade level, but may still have some gaps if we're not careful, they're going to fall back. And blue, they're on grade level, but we're going to talk about what that still means. There still could be some additional gaps in there. So green and blue is telling you they're on grade level. Red is saying they're at least over a year behind, and yellow is saying they are a year behind. So what we want to do is take a look at one of these students and see what this really means. And the reason we're going to really look at what this means is because when we went out to the schools, one thing we talked about when we looked at the check-in data, for example, in math, we had students that weren't performing well in geometry. And so what we wanted to look at, is there correlation between other data sources? So the first student I want us to look at is Chester Barrett. And so we're going to look at Chester. And I want us to change to math, please, and test data. So Chester showed that he was a blue child, and Chester was doing really well. However, what this chart shows us is that Chester also has some additional gaps. So if I look at this child's actually in 4th grade, and if I look at geometry, he's scoring at 350. So if I look at this chart and look at the spring for 350, that falls at beginning of 3rd grade. So that child is almost a year behind in the geometry area. So if we think about that, if on the check-in they weren't doing well, that tells us they have some gaps that are back in the 3rd grade that we may need to fill in, and how do we do that? So each of these numbers correlates to a grade level equivalent. So then if I look at, and I'm sorry, I have to keep on getting closer. If I look at operations, right, they are only at 200. 200 is a kindergarten level. So what this quickly tells us, where are they falling as far as overall domains, so that we can kind of think about where do we need to start with instruction. So we know in different areas they're stronger, in different areas they're weaker, and so we have to figure out where does it fall apart and what do we do. So what the program then does is design a learning path for each child. So if we go to individualized learning, it designs a path for that child to go through and puts, based on their child's needs, a path that they will go through as far as lessons that they'll do online that are aligned to those domains and those needs that will help fill in those gaps. So like we said, this is a 4th grade child, but what you'll notice, they're starting with what grade level material? Kindergarten, because of those gaps that they had with operations. So to show more of an example of what that might look like when a child's doing it, can you go to language arts on that same child? You'll see as they do those assignments, they'll get a score. So over to the right-hand side, you'll see, for example, with this child, they are doing really well with the first skill, writing a description, they had 100%. But then we looked at short vowels, they're struggling with that skill. So now what we can do is figure out that that's a skill they're lacking and that we need to reteach it in our small group before we reassign that actual activity. These are also aligned to different standards in our standard course of study. So Drew, if you'll hit the plus sign next to one of those activities.
Wait a minute.
Uh-huh.
Look at, it's amazing that the time, telling time was 24%. The sundial,
I'm sorry.
the time,
Mm-hmm.
Time.
telling time, the sundial, 24.
24 minutes
Was it 24%?
on which one? I'm
It
sorry.
was telling time to sundial, wherever it was science.
Telling time. Let me see where I see it. I'm trying to see
Like
it.
the last from the bottom that's showing from the bottom.
Oh,
Is
so
that 54?
54% in 4 minutes. So yes, that's another thing we have to look at, because what we know is some kids rush through things.
Yeah.
And so what we have to also consider is, are they rushing through the activities? So like any other data, we have to analyze what's going on. So is it a lack of skill, or is it somebody trying to speed through something? So those are different points of data that we definitely have to look at, Dr. Emanuel, because we know some students will sit down at a computer and click away instead of taking that time. So that's where a different conversation occurs, talking to that child about, let's take our time, let's look at it, and then try it again before we decide, do you have this skill or not? But that's a great point. So we also have teachers looking at that time. So if you'll notice on this one, if you'll go, you'll see with the, this particular activity that Drew opened up, that you'll see the state standards. So if I click on that, the teacher knows which standards those activities worked on. So that can give me an idea of where do I need to go, or what do I need to work on, because the students are struggling with that. The other thing I can do is look at, is this a trend in the entire grade level, so that I know, there are a lot of students that are struggling with this piece. So if we'll close out of this child, and I'm sorry, before we go on, open that one back. Well, let's just go to the next one. I can explain it. Go to Connie for me. So Connie, on the other hand, she's already struggling. We know that. And so we assign progress monitoring. Progress monitoring is assigned so that the child takes that assessment every couple weeks so they can progress how they're doing with those skills that they're working on. So what you'll notice, Connie is taking progress monitoring assessments, and what this does is give us what the projected is and what they need to do. So we can watch every week and see how they're performing when they take that assessment, to see, is what we're doing in the class with Classworks and our small group instruction having an impact on them. And so I would wonder with that fourth assessment, what happened, because they were doing really well and then all of a sudden just dropped down. So that's where I'd have to further analyze, where this child's sick, did they rush through it, what happened, so that I can figure out why are they dropping. And so those are things that we talk about when we talk about actually analyzing this progress monitoring data. This data, though, gives us quick assessments about where they are and what they need to work on as we continue. Any questions about those two data points or the individual learning plan and how that works? So it actually progress monitors all the red and yellow students every week so that we track what's going on with that child, so we quickly know how to proceed with those children. Okay, if you close that out. So what you'll see is we take this data and they also take different types of assessments. So what you'll see, any child, and this is of course a sample class, so it's not going to follow exactly the rules it's supposed to, but you'll notice next to George Birch, he's taking the grammar assessment, and this assessment quickly tells us that that's the skill he was lowest in. That's what he's working on, and that's what he's being progress monitored in. What you'll also see next to that is the rate of improvement. So are they improving at the rate they should? So for example, George is not, so we need to look at why that's happening. Are we providing the right instruction for that child? And then we can see the two children above, they're green, so it's working for them right now at the rate they need to be. And so if a child is in yellow or in yellow, they should be doing curriculum sampling, which is just grade level assessment data. So this is one way for us to quickly track what's going on, and they follow those pieces every day. So let's go to generate. Do you see it, Drew?
Report.
Yes, I'm sorry. Is it working for us, or is it frozen?
It's grayed out.
It's grayed out. So it's not going to let us run the report. And they had to reset this account for us this morning. But what we can do with this report is actually, we can run a report that shows how many kids are struggling with what area. So for example, if we know we have 6 children that are struggling with grammar and they're at kindergarten level in 4th grade, then we know we can pull that small group together and work on those particular skills that a kindergartner needs to fill in to help them get back on grade level. So this is just a quick way for us to do that. The other thing it does as we move forward, the teachers are now currently taking the middle of the year placement test. And so what we can see is where they were at the beginning of the year and where they are at middle of the year. So some of the students that we've been looking at, we can't look at this in the demo. This morning, I saw several students that may have been at 320 at the beginning of the year, and now we're at 380. So they've made 60 points growth. And so if we look, for example, at 2nd grade on your chart in math, and they were at 320, that would have been a 2nd grade level, but 380 would have put them up at a 4th grade level. So that shows us how they're growing and shifting in the needs that they have so that we can quickly adjust that data and think about what we need to do as far as classroom instruction. Any questions you have about Classworks? So the point is that we can go in here and constantly look at this, take in our check-in data, take all of our data sources together and see, are we seeing the same thing? And how can we quickly help our students fill in some of the gaps that the teachers don't always get to, especially when they're 2 or 3 grade levels behind? Anything else? Mr. Terry?
Which assessments feed into this system?
So currently we have check-ins feeding into it, so it'll readjust that actual path as far as their learning path to help fill in some of those additional gaps. So after they take a check-in, we have Cindy load that data into here. And what it does, where we saw that individual learning path with all those different activities, it adds activities to that to say, this child didn't do well in this or did well in that, and adds those activities in there to help with that. Currently, we're also working with Classworks to put in the formative assessments they're taking every week, so that, every 2 weeks, so that data can also feed into this. So Classworks is partnering with us right now to help make that happen also.
Dr. Carr, this may not be a fair question. We talked about it. So Classworks, this data as a predictor of?
Is a predictor of, what we found is based on other research, it can help predict if they're gonna pass the EOG or not, if we do it with fidelity. So it said that the majority of the kids, 65% of the kids in math would pass if they're passing here in Classworks, and 75% in reading. So that's a predictor to try to help us know what is the chance of a child passing. So if we can fill in those gaps, that'll help lead us into better conversations of where we go next and who do we concentrate on when we think about that additional support and putting our people in those places.
Dr. Carr, you talk about fidelity. The superintendent brought that up. Let's go back to fidelity in the teachers understanding this, knowing how to use it and using it. Now, I know that you understand, and probably your staff understands it, and maybe our sweet understands it. How, I'd like to hear from her, just maybe from a principal. How do your staff members understand this and use it? What percentage would you say that totally are committed and understand it? Because I agree with Dr. Carr. It's a good predictor and the superintendent. But you talk about the word fidelity. How far are we going with that, with using this? Are you comfortable responding to that? Can't you respond to?
Yes.
Okay.
So I hope I address all your questions, Dr. Emanuel. I feel that the staff as a whole is very comfortable with using it. When we get to fidelity, the more and more that the district gives us, PD through Classworks, we learn more things that we can do to check that fidelity. So you know as well as I do, what's not monitored doesn't get done. So now we have access as administrators of the building to have reports sent to us weekly on time on task, usage, and the percentage that's passing. The kid can be online and be on Classworks for 2 hours a week. But if I'm at 20% all week long for those 2 hours, then that's a behavior I've got to go reteach because it was 2 hours of wasted time. So then it falls back in our lap to be addressed with our staff, if that answers.
That answers. And by the way, congratulations. Aren't you a newlywed?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you.
You didn't hear me. I said, that's why that smile's still on the face. Let me follow up with what Dr. Emanuel's saying too. Now, we've had the workshops on Saturdays. That's been Classworks. Okay, we brought in teachers doing Classworks and everything. So where are we at as far as if we just say to just the general training of our staff countywide with how many has had Classworks, what percentage or, has had it? And then, how far do we have to go to get everybody at least 100% trained? Because that's always been, one of the issues we have with programs. We do some training and then sometimes the training falls off. And we miss these people that come in later on and they're trying to get it from somebody else. So kind of where are we with constantly getting our staff trained?
So we have training at least once a month that is provided on Saturdays. And those sessions have multiple sessions. So if a teacher cannot come to a certain session, they can choose a different session because we know sometimes life gets in the way. And those sessions, we've talked about if they could start recording them because we do want to bank so that people can also go back to those. So those sessions, though, are targeted on different topics as we go. We have anywhere from 500 to 600 teachers that join on those Saturdays. So we have quite a few in those grade levels because it's only the teachers that actually use Classworks that are joining. So it's not every high school teacher. So for that high school, for example, it's only English and math, basically. Elementary, K-8, it's mostly English, math, EC, and EL. We do have some additional teachers that just want to help and do support Classworks that are also joining, and all the principals and APs. The additional support comes is now we're trying to tailor some additional sessions because we know everybody learns at a different pace and everybody needs some different things. So Classworks actually this weekend is going to put out a survey to say what are additional needs so that we can provide more targeted support. Because maybe kindergarten has different questions that we have not addressed. So how do we address those? What does it look like in high school that may need a little different support? So they're going to start asking us those questions so we can provide more tailored support. They also, this past week, offered everybody the opportunity, if you wanted to sign up for 30-minute sessions just with your own school, to say, these are my questions at my school, and that may be a little different from the other school down the street, because we know the needs are a little different. So we've had several schools that have signed up to join those sessions and be in individual sessions. The other thing that we've done is we have sort of like a coffee conversation type of thing where once a month, Classworks has a whole day that you can come in and just join anytime you want to. So if you as a teacher have a question or you want to learn something, you can literally just log on and they'll be live there to help discuss anything. Any school can also, through the little help button, you can actually sign up for your own 30-minute session with Classworks just to get some help. So we're trying to layer a lot of different ways because we know everybody needs something different into that piece. And then also all the academic coaches and supervisors have been in those trainings so that if somebody asks, how do I do it or what do I need to do, they're available to support in any way also.
And if I may add that, so you can keep tabs or calculate tabulations on what is being done by all the teachers in the county as far as how much training they've had, what they've done. So just as a thought, we get into, let's say we'd be using this again next year, the classwork. We get into the May, June and start running things like, how much is done, where are the teachers at? Then if we need to come back in the summer where big groups can be done, instead of having to do it while school is going on.
Right.
With everything else that's happening, I think that would be something that might be helpful and provide some opportunity for people to have training.
And I agree, Mr. Craig, that would be a great opportunity because a lot of schools want to do the face-to-face and they actually offered the face-to-face, but because of the situation currently, that was sort of hard for us to put that together. So there are conversations of moving forward, when can we make face-to-face? Because that's easier for a lot of people, including myself, to have somebody sit down right next to me and have those conversations.
The thing of having this data and getting it right back immediately almost, this is what the child does not know. That's great if you're going to be able to turn around and use it and put it in practice. If you can't, then it's like a lot of other data, it's not in it.
Absolutely.
Madam Chairman, if I may, and you're absolutely right. Rather than waiting for 3 weeks, whatever the case might be, that immediate turnaround. We do have someone who's went through the process, Fidelity, that if you attend the training and the workshop, what can we expect? Identify who you are, be sure, and then your experience with classwork of trying to learn it, Fidelity with it, and what it actually would do as an experienced user.
I'm Camicia Scriven. I am a social studies supervisor. And using this program is something that you can use in small group instruction. And I've seen it where you definitely are going to see growth at the end. If you collaborate with your other teachers, it's something that you can use. Use that data that she said, you bring the data in, reflecting at the end of the day. And then the next day, you should be able to create small groups for whichever group. So this group, let's say second grade, they're low in a section, then you group them together and then you can, use that as a progress monitoring piece for them. So when I use it, I collaborate with the ELA teacher. She would tell me some of the struggles. I would tell her the struggles I saw on my side, and we would come up together and we would collaborate and we would make groups together. So those groups were happening in my class as well as her class. And at the end of the year, the growth that I saw on social studies, she had that same growth. And you could see that the EVOS data was the exact same, and the kids grew in both subject areas. And it was huge growth, and it was equivalent to what Classworks said would happen. So it is a great program to use.
And then please don't miss what Dr. Carr said earlier. Once we get the data, then it will create the individual lesson for that student, correct?
Yes.
So that time piece.
Any other questions about Classworks? Dr. Bullock?
I think it's 2 more slides ahead. So I'm going to talk about that acronym again, MTSS, multi-tiered system of support. Basically, some of the information that that Wendy just shared in terms of the classwork piece. So the classwork piece is really being implemented right now in the district in terms of an intervention piece, because we recognized that our teachers, as much as they want to be able to provide that level of support in terms of intervention, lots of times our teachers are having difficulty drilling back and truly understanding what it was in terms of foundational pieces that our students might have been missing. So that's how Classworks has come into the picture as an intervention resource for our teachers. But when we talk about MTSS, we're talking about everybody. I don't know, it's been a little while since we had our little session about MTSS, but MTSS, remember, includes everybody. We are all MTSS. So one of the biggest things that we're trying to push out right now and make sure that our folks understand is that the largest part of MTSS, 80% of our efforts are directed solely towards the core. So we're not even talking about intervention right now. We have got to make sure that we are devoting our attention to the core, which is what every child should expect to receive day in and day out in any classroom across the district of Robinson County. So if we're meeting 80% of our students' needs, we're meeting about 80%, that's kind of like the key number. If we're meeting about 80% of their needs, then I would suggest that we have a solid core. Right now, we are not quite there. So a lot of our efforts are going to be focused on making sure first that we've laid that foundation, and that foundation is making sure we have a solid core. We're focusing our efforts there with that 80%. And then, of course, once we get that in place and that is solid, then we can talk about intervention and we can talk about, extension and those intensive pieces that will come into place for those students who need it. If everything were a perfect world, again, 80% of our kids would be supported just with that core alone. 10 to 15% of our kids would need that additional bit of support or extension. And then about 5% of our kids, we would obviously see some needs in terms of some intensive supports we would need to put in place. But that quote up there, the best intervention is what? Prevention. The best intervention is prevention. And so that's what we're trying to preach, when we're having our PD sessions with our academic coaches or with our principals, our MTSS coordinators, just with every group that we have coming in and out. We're trying to make sure that the core is the focus of our efforts right now. Cole, will move us on?
And before we move on, may I ask the question, please?
Yes, sir.
Just for that. Okay, so the emphasis on the core, our intent to be at 80%, which is on that. And so you were saying we're not there, and we're not. This may or may not be a fair question. We're moving in that direction, but what we're focusing on, Dr. Carter and Dr. Bullitt, is lesson design to help us teach the core, and that conversation of, as you said earlier, this is an intervention piece, right? It is not the core. It has not replaced the standards and on that. It is simply an intervention piece that will go in and create the individual lessons to help master those standards. So talk about that and where you think we are in terms of teaching the core, because that has to happen.
You jump in if I say something I shouldn't say, maybe. So, our pretty much our discussions have been, and we've had some very honest and very transparent discussions about the core and about what we feel like are our needs. And I know now that we have Relay, it's working with 12 of our schools in terms of coaching support for our principals. There is a lot of effort being put towards principals being the instructional leaders on the campus. A lot of work with Relay, and I know Dr. Clark can probably speak more to that. She's more familiar with that than I am. But we are really focusing our efforts on lesson design, the gradual release model, the I do, we do, you do. Jump in and help as.
So,
It's a lot of it coming together all at one time.
Okay, so may I jump in on this?
Please help.
So one of the indicators is that we're moving towards teaching the core is we'll see less worksheets.
Yes.
It's a powerful indicator that we may or may not be teaching the core, correct?
Yes.
And that's critical. So when we begin to see that shift, then that means we're going to see more direct instruction. But that gradual release, so let's set that context in terms of that. Less worksheets, more direct instruction, and then the gradual release. Talk about it from that standpoint, because again, that's the indicator when we see worksheets, a lot not tied to the standards.
and so a lot of it go back to, which Ms. Amina can probably speak to, we've done a lot of unpacking the standards so that we do that clear alignment of what does modeling look like? Because unless you know what the standard really means and what the standard is really saying, that's where a lot of the work starts, so that then they can start working on designing an effective model so they can do the modeling piece, and then also that gradual release. So how do we do, you do? The other piece we talked about with that is, of course, the aggressive monitoring. And I know there's been a lot of practices at certain schools where we say, what does it look like, what the child should be doing, so that we even know when we're walking around, are they doing it effectively? So having a model in hand that the teacher has completed, walking around with a purpose to say, these 6 students have it and these 6 students are struggling. And knowing directly then that I need to change my instruction based on what I'm getting. So that formative assessment or that exit ticket that's happening during those classes is quickly redesigning that lesson as you go. So it can't be a situation where what we've done for years, if we walk around, watch kids doing it, but then they don't necessarily know what's actually happening or who knows it. So how do I readjust my lesson based on that data I'm collecting right there in real time? And then principals giving that real-time feedback to say, how do I make changes to my instruction? So I know Amanda's done a lot of work with that with Relay, that might be able to speak to that, but that's where we've done a lot of things, is those 3 pieces, really focusing on developing a scripted model, developing a scripted you do, we do, looking at what an exemplar truly looks like when that standard is met, so that we truly have a clear indication of, are we meeting what we need? So that's where a lot of the work is going, so that we can design effective lessons and talk about it as a group and all be on the same page.
Dr. Clark said, that's what who are we? I know that it's teachers. Other than teachers, who are we?
We as
That you just described, who are we?
So with the process that we're doing now, first with the 12 schools, it's every principal in that building, every academic coach, and everybody in that building working together to do those pieces, including us here at the central office. So we're all learning that process together so that we're all speaking the same language. What we've done is, because we don't just want those 12 schools learning the process that we're using, we've started working with every single school in the district to talk about how do we effectively unpack a standard in a different way than we've done before so that we make sure those pieces align? How do we go into the classroom and observe to say, I don't see the alignment, or I do see the alignment, I see modeling, or I don't see modeling? And so what we've done is we've had principals come visit our relay schools. We've started the process so that they can see what does it look like in real action, so that we're all as a whole group in the district learning it together and doing this together as a process. Because we know as a district, all of us need to grow and make sure that we have a common understanding and are learning that same process together.
Okay, now have you had any evidence with any kind of testing thus far, any kind of test, and I don't know if you've tested, but I do know, that this is transferred down to learning, any outputs from the kids? Has it transferred down yet?
May I answer that?
Yes, sir.
And then part of it, at least. So our intent is, and if you remember our conversation, is the principal has to be the instructional leader
Yes,
of that
sir.
building. So that's our focus. How can that principal be that instructional leader in the classroom? Now, the term aggressive monitoring sounds negative, but it's not. What it really means is we provide instant feedback, something which has not been practiced, because the practice in the past across the nation, wait a day or wait till that afternoon, but that aggressive monitoring means, no, provide that feedback now. Ms. Tanner, Ms. Graham, talk about that, because when you went through some of that training, you put that in practice, and you really saw the advantage of aggressive monitoring with that feedback. Instant.
Good evening again, Dr. Emanuel. Relay is at St. Paul's Elementary School. So two parts, you asked about data, and that came up because Relay coaches me from Illinois once a week on a Zoom meeting. And it is one of the most powerful experiences I've had in over 20 years in PSRC. And the lady has taught me more than a lot of years of a lot of college degrees. And her question to me was, well, Amanda, we've done this, 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 and this. Now we need to know that this, this, and this is working. We are collecting a wealth of data on a regular basis, Dr. Emanuel, and especially this month with it being the mid-year point. And I'm excited, and part of what we're going to share with you tonight, I can tell you right now that I can only speak for St. Paul's, but in the fall, we had 59 third graders, this is my third grade team, that were below or well below on that Classworks Universal Screener just in reading. As of today, we have 24. That's phenomenal to us. And we're going to own that, and we're going to say, you know, we are working towards growth, and we're going to get there. So we're excited about that. So I hope that's part of it. And we'll have more data when benchmarks and M-class and everything is completed this month to be able to better answer that with exact numbers. What Dr. Williamson is referring to is real-time feedback. She came in November, and she said, what do you need, Miss Amanda? What is it that you feel like is your big rock? And I'm sitting there, and I don't know this lady, Dr. Emanuel. They're all around the table, and I said, well, I thought, and there was a long pause, and she was going to let me wait it out. She wasn't going to say anything. And I finally said, well, you know what? I said, I'm really good about going in there, and I walk around, and I look, and I'll leave them a sticky note. And I can still see some of them with their sticky notes on a bulletin board or on their laptops where that meant something to them. She said, I know what you need. She said, I need to teach you how to give them live feedback. I said, so you want me to walk in there when they're teaching and tell them, oh, no, you got to fix that? She said, yes. She said, let me show you. So it started that day, Dr. Emanuel, and I can tell you that I'm not a master of relay and all the leverages and everything that I need to know about it. But I can tell you that there's not a staff member on that campus that doesn't expect me and my coach in those rooms on a daily basis. And they expect us at some point in time, instead of running from us around the room, they expect us to come confront them. And it's not an I got you thing. It's a, I'm gonna whisper in your ear and I'm gonna make a suggestion. And before we leave out of that room, at this point in time, now not in November, Dr. Emanuel, but at this point in time, 99% of it takes place before I ever leave that room, and they've made the change already in that instant. And it can be something from as simple as, well, next time, how about you don't talk? You just show them the problem that you've modeled, and you just say, all right, boys and girls, let me see what you can do. And you just pause, and you just walk the room, you let them struggle through it, you let them do it, just see what they can do. And that's a simple version, but it has made tremendous impact across that campus, tremendous.
Thank you.
Because we have to remember, the definition of depth of knowledge is the complexity of what I'm asking that student to do, and we force them to think. And that's what's happening with that. Now, the data part, do we think we're going to see a lot of our kids end up 4s and 5s this year? Probably not.
But they will grow.
They're going to grow, and we're going to have a true baseline. That's what we're after this year, is a true baseline. And that true baseline will help dictate our summer work.
Thank you.
There's not a whole bunch more I want to mention about this. When we first did these presentations, the context of the things that we were talking about were a little different. And so conversations have kind of shifted and changed. Really, like day to day, week to week, these things are changing very quickly. But one of the things I do want to point out here, we are right now spending a lot of time in planning about how master schedules are going to be created for the fall. And because we know that everything comes as a result of that master schedule. So that's one of our things that we're looking at for next year, making sure that our master schedule mirrors what it is we want to see in our buildings, which means that instruction comes first. Instruction comes first. So that's one of our plans for master schedule in the fall.
Thank you.
Okay, one of the first things that we're talking about today is drilling backwards. And when you drill backwards, you have the vertical progressions of the ELA standards. If you'll click on that first document, please, Cole. One of the things that we've pushed out to teachers is our vertical progressions. We love to have our vertical progressions because that tells us what has come in the past and what's coming next. In ELA, our vertical progressions, we have like 2 or 3 different charts. One has the highlighted, which this is not that one, but one has highlighted as what's different, and the other one is just plain. I really like 3.1, which is key ideas and details. In kindergarten, for example, let's go back to kindergarten. Let's go to RL or RI, if you'll go, 3.1. Or 1.1, key ideas and details. Okay, everything you're gonna see in kindergarten, it doesn't matter the one, says with prompting and support. Everything in kindergarten is with prompting and support. Okay, you're in foundational skills, go to, okay, 1.1. Keep going, you're in phonics. Please keep going up. Stop right there. Okay, you are still in reading foundational skills. Keep going up, please. Okay, stop right there. Go down. Okay, if you'll look at RL, that's literature. With prompting and support, ask and answer questions about key details in text. When you go to first grade, that standard is almost the exact same, but you take away with prompting and support. So the standards are the same as you go down, they just get a little bit harder. So we want our teachers to be able to see this, we want our parents to be able to see this. So if you go to the first grade, the RL 1.1 says ask and answer questions about key details in text, but it takes away that with prompting and support. So, and then when you go to second grade, it's phrased just a little bit different and it adds on. So the basic concept is still the same. And it's the same way with all of our standards. It gets a little bit more difficult and it adds a little bit on, or it takes a little bit away. So these documents are absolutely wonderful. And there's another version, if you'll go back, Cole. The very next one is with the highlighted tool. And it shows you exactly what's different. This is the exact same document, but the only difference is it shows you what's different because it highlights it for you. So the important part of this, if you'll see these little highlights, it tells you what's different with the highlights from one grade level to the next. These are very important documents for our teachers to have when they meet and our parents to have when they meet, so that they'll know what the grade level before them had to know and what's coming next. That's the vertical progressions. Because don't you think that the third grade teacher needs to know what they had to learn in second grade? And then don't you think that the third grade teacher needs to know what they need to know to get ready for fourth grade? That's the real important part. What do we need to know to prepare them for the next grade level? What do I need to know them? What do they need to know this year? And then what do they need to know for that next grade level? So these are the vertical progression tools that we have made sure every teacher has access to for our PLCs and for our plated time. Trina, I think you're next. There's one more for the ELA standards, and it's the learning progressions. I think it's the same, and it's the exact same thing.
It has examples of quality of work and what students will understand, and to what students who have not mastered, students who are beginning to master, and students who are proficient, and what that looks like. The math.
I'll just go ahead and try to learn it, okay? All right, so the first document we have here is much like the one that Dr. Evans was showing us earlier. This is a document that DPI put together for us, and it shows the progression of standards. So when you look here. So if we're looking here and we see numbers and operations in base 10, it shows what they need to know in kindergarten, how it builds from grade level to grade level. So this is very important for teachers to look at, to go back to see, you know, they are not quite getting what I'm teaching right now. What is it that they missed the year before? So this is one document that we've shared. Another document that we've looked at is called the Math Coherence Map. And this is actually from Achieve the Core. Now, Achieve the Core is a Common Core website. North Carolina is not Common Core any longer. However, our math standards are still very, very similar to the standards in Common Core. So let's take a look at this. Now, I'm gonna have to click a few things for us to get going. All right, so you'll notice once you click a couple of times, you get to the grade level. So I'm just going to look at, let's go to third grade for a second. So it tells you the domains that you have here. So whatever you might be looking at, and I'm going to go to numbers, operations, and fractions. So when we click here, so when we look at this, it gives us different standards that we have here, and I'm just going to choose one. Again, I'm going to have to click through a couple of times. But what you notice here is like a flow chart. So this standard in the middle is the one that I'm looking at. But what standards feed into that? So if you look to the left, notice it's got grade level 2 at the very beginning. We look at this measurement and data. These 3 different standards here feed into fraction standard. And from there, look at all the standards that go to the right. This standard feeds into the other ones you see on the right for the next grade level, or other standards that we may have again in 3rd grade. So it's kind of like a flow chart. It's very similar to what we just showed you as far as vertical progressions as far as vertical progression goes, but it's just in a different format. Now, another thing that we have here on this one that I really like is, what do you notice? They have a task. So if they're having trouble finding tasks for their students to do, they can go to this website and it'll have 2 or 3 tasks that they can use in class that are specific to that particular standard. All right, and we have one more that's math related. And this is from, again, a Common Core website, Achievement Core, and it's very similar to what we saw before. Again, it's just kind of a different format. It breaks down each grade level and it shows the major standards or the major focus of each grade level. And it gives you the highlights on the side. And so you'll notice from K, and this is just for K8, it goes through and does the same thing for each grade level. And I'm gonna move it down to the very bottom, because I like this page as well. It kind of puts it all on one page for you, K8. It shows the major topics, the major things you're going to do in each grade level and how they feed into each other all the way from grades K through 8. All right, so those are the 3 main math documents that we've been sharing. Do you have any questions on those?
That's a question,
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, of the whole team and to answer that. So we understand the vertical, we understand all of that. So what are we doing and how are we helping teachers take that information and design lessons and add rigor to that? That's the challenge, right? How can we design lessons with the rigor based on that vertical and then not losing sight of that POC horizontal work that has to happen? But what are we doing to help teachers understand, to take that standard and add the rigor that we need for that to happen, to challenge kids?
A lot of that information is being put into the pacing guide. That's where a lot of it's being placed, is in the pacing guide. And then as we go out and we're helping plan and put that into their current lessons. So we're also trying to pull it there. So as we go out and we meet with teachers and we go out and we're not just showing them these documents. When we meet, we're talking about, okay, you see, this is where they are. This is what we're doing now, but this is where they have to be. So this is where we need them to go. So if this is where we are right now in numbers and operations in base 10, this is where they're going to have to be. And right now, for example, the CFA that I just did, we were working on fractions, some of the fractions. Well, I'm still working on fractions in 3rd grade, and we're also working with fractions in 4th grade right now. So both 3rd and 4th grade are working on fractions. And it's very similar problems right now. Why not try to mix some of it up and it's the exact same? So why are my 3rd grade teachers not talking to my 4th grade teachers? Right now is a perfect time for them to be talking Because on the pacing guide right now, they're working at the same time on some of the same content.
One of the major components of our pacing guide revision team, which is going to begin on Monday, is looking at designing effective lesson designs and putting those in the pacing guide. We're talking about putting at least 1 month's worth, if not more, of effective lesson designs inside of the pacing guides for each grade level, so that when beginning teachers and other teachers who are struggling at designing their own lesson plans, they will have a model of an effective lesson that's designed by a master teacher. And that will be put into the pacing guide this coming year.
Dr. Williamson, to expound upon what we're doing right now, specifically in K2, these CFAs, these common formative assessments that our K2 students are taking, is the first time they've experienced questions like this that are directly correlated to the standard. So part of the benefit of them taking an assessment every other week is when we go out in the schools, we're having those very candid data conversations with our teachers. And what I have been thankful to hear is that teachers are looking at the questions, they're looking at the depth of knowledge of the questions. If students aren't mastering where they want them to be, then they're coming up with a plan to reteach those standards and not reteach it the same way that they taught it previously, reteaching it a different way to reach the students that they may not have reached the first time.
I can add on to that. So one of the things that I've enjoyed this year is the language, adopting the language about the know and show chart. So that's becoming more and more universal in our schools as teachers understand that we're going to identify what students need to know and how they will show it. And one thing, those are really, really important conversations. Students need clarity. Teachers need clarity, and students need clarity about, have I met this standard? Have I met the expectations? So the other thing I like to think about, and I had conversations with a principal today, and I'll be going back to that school next week, is so you're looking at the standard, and we're breaking that down. But this echoes what Zach just said. So we're also looking at the assessments and breaking down why students are not being successful on a particular question. So analyzing what is the missing pieces. Sometimes I might be getting that data from Classworks. Sometimes if it's a CFA where it's from SchoolNet and the passages or the questions have been released by DPI, then really digging into that. And then at the same time, that third piece is those students in that classroom, so that I'm analyzing all of that. And I feel like, because I was in PLCs today at 2 different schools, I'm hearing more and more of that terminology being used. And I know that we have listings of PLCs are, so we can have conversations, not just observe or support teachers that way, but so we can have conversations during planning time to talk to teachers about lesson design, about clarifying objectives.
And then
I'm very encouraged by that.
And then to add on to that, we also hold weekly office hours. So any teacher then that has a question or they want to drill further into these, they are more than welcome to pop into our office hours, and we will sit down with them one-on-one at that point and go over some of this stuff with them. So we're trying to do a multifaceted way of supporting our teachers.
I have, and this is not negative, this is to see if it's getting any better. Senator and I've had this discussion before, and at one point in time, K2 teachers were doing probably over 30% of their time assessing. My concern is, and it's been up to the legislators too, their concern, are we spending too much time assessing in K2 and not enough time teaching? And what negative impact does that have on kids learning to read? Now, I'm asking you all, is it any better than it was at one time, the assessing?
Dr. Emmanuel, I think that specifically in K2, we're shifting the mindset of our teachers, or that's the hope, is that these CFAs are not an I gotcha, just speaking about the CFAs in particular. They truly are just a measure of how are my students interpreting the standards? How are they learning what I am facilitating? And then one good thing about Amplify now is that it is much more intuitive than it used to be. The assessments don't take nearly as long. So we only do the three beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year assessment. But now the progress monitoring platform is more streamlined, where it should only take 3 to 5 minutes every 2 weeks or every month, depending on where the student is.
Doc, just to let you know, do you remember the TRC part of the assessment?
Yes, ma'am.
Had to read the book to the child?
Yes, ma'am.
So long, and then you read another book?
Yes, ma'am.
That part's gone.
Okay, so you,
That was the part that took so long.
okay, so you feel that the teachers have more time to teach the reading skills now, and they're not having to do all this? It's not extreme.
No, it's,
The assessing is not extreme in K2.
it's not as bad. The part that you were thinking about where they were spending so much time assessing, that was the TRC portion of the Amplify assessment that took so long. Now the Amplify assessment's not taking nearly as long. Do you want, Amanda can probably,
No. I trust you. My concern is that in K2, it's so formative to teach the basic reading skills. I personally would rather see teachers teaching than assessing. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just how I feel.
I understand your.
Because teachers in K2, kids are just yearning to learn to read. The love of reading, you know, establish that first, let them love to read to those children. But to spend an amount of time assessing, it sort of turns kids off. I'm just saying, I know you got to assess, the state says you got to assess, I'm not stupid, I know that. But I just don't want our system to fail kids and just turn on to all the assessment and let teachers not forget that they've got to teach the basic skills of reading and the love of reading.
Dr. Mango, yes, compared to years ago, it's so much better now. Because like Sandra was saying with the TRC and they have to read the book, you kept reading, it would take hours, but no, it's nothing like that. And teachers do have more time for that direct instruction, for that independent practice, and like I said, the love of reading. And when we go in those K2 classrooms, that's what we look for, is make sure that they are actively engaged, because we know that we have to get that K2 foundation in place, or we're not going to get anywhere where we need to.
Right.
So we are pushing literacy, and I know Amanda will, echo this, but I mean, we emphasize literacy across the board, especially in K2.
Because you're not going to beat a good K2 foundation. I mean, and I'm not belittling anything you're doing, because I'm very proud of you. I really am. But I want to make sure that we take advantage of those K2 years, because you can't bring them back.
Our K2 teachers, they are working really hard, and I know Mr. Zach and Dr. Evans and Mr. Davis, when we're out in the schools, I mean, you can tell, because, teaching kindergarten is tough anyway.
Other than what the state requires, and this is just me personally, if anybody ever tries to sell you a bill of goods to assess K2 children, please don't buy anything else.
Right.
We will make a concerted effort to monitor that as well, Dr. Manuel. And at the end of the year, we will reassess and see if there was any detriment to that. And because I want to address your concern and not just put it on the back burner, I want to actually look into that to see if there is any hindrance there. And so we will be taking a look at that and monitoring that.
Yeah.
I will take.
Thank you anyway, but all of you, thank you for everything you do, though, really. How long have we been going, Doc?
About an hour and 20 minutes.
Yep.
Now, let me ask a question about how long do you anticipate we have to go from here?
Well, we're
No,
going
I'm not saying we're going to quit, I just need to know about how much more time.
presentation is actually a hands-on where the school is going to model a PLC. So that would take how long, Amanda?
So long.
I mean,
No, I'm not, I just need an idea of how much longer, because we may have to adjourn and do another session. Because I don't want to keep people to midnight, because they will never come to another meeting.
No, you're fine, Doc, because a lot of the slides we've already hit on, with the analyzing of the data, so the team feels like we've already covered that. But this right here, what you're about to see is a big chunk.
Excuse me, Dr. Robert, you still didn't answer my question. How many other parts do we have to?
15 to 20 minutes.
But now we need to get to the rest of the agenda. How about the rest of the agenda you've got on here?
That will,
And powerful instructional strategies and the others, because there are one or two others that need to be added to it. So you feel that your part is about how much longer?
15 more minutes with them, and then we can do the latter part.
Now, we have some curriculum meetings, Mr. Terry and Mr. Vonda. You want to hang in 15 more minutes, 20 minutes?
Yeah, we're hanging in.
Be all right?
Yeah.
How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Alice.
Yeah. Happy New Year, Mr. Terry. Okay. Now, if I don't want to cut, because the staff, they've worked hard to prepare. I don't want to cut anybody. Has anybody not presented that's supposed to present? You're Sandy. Sandy, do you have a part you and Miss Etta?
Good, Dr. Manuel.
We're just here, we're fine.
You just here to support you.
Yes, yeah.
Has anybody been neglected? Because I know how that is to work to get something, then you just shun now. Everybody happy? If you're happy, raise your hand. All right.
So if you're happy.
All right, Dr. Robert, well, you got 15 minutes. I don't know how you're gonna do it.
I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Graham at this time, and she'll introduce her teachers and tell us about her presentation.
So we were asked here tonight from St. Paul's Elementary School to show you a portion of what a data PLC would be. They talked a lot tonight about a lot of different components of data. So we're going to show you, this is part of my third grade team. I have with me Miss Alexis Rozier and Miss Tanya Velasquez, two third grade teachers with me. So we're going to role play for you, okay?
Go for it.
All right. All right, so good evening, ladies. Good evening. So just a little bit of background to get everyone caught up. Back in December, we went and we looked at our informational standard, RI 3.3, and we saw from what we had done with Sacagawea and our know and show chart that there were some gaps. So you remember right before we went home for Christmas, when we looked at the student work samples, we hadn't really met our exemplar of what we were trying to reach. So remind me, Ms. Rozier, if you don't mind, what were some of those gaps that we saw with RI 3.3?
When we looked at the exemplars, we had three main areas that we were going to focus on for the gaps. It was vocabulary, effect, and sequencing.
Right, and those were the big ones that we saw that we totally missed the mark on. We've got to go back and redo. So not only did we see what our gap was, Ms. V, but we also as a team agreed on what our next steps were going to be to go back and reteach it. So what did we decide?
We really wanted to focus on the vocabulary, so we're going to do more semantic mapping, synonym and antonyms of words, and also some relatable events.
Right, exactly. Okay, good. So then, in moving forward, I have for you here where we were with our common formative assessments, the beginning of December, right before we went home for Christmas. And I even put in some reading benchmark data, and we'll have some more numbers soon. And just as you scan across there, it's clearly evident from those numbers on the right and the left, those two informational standards I pulled out, where do you see a deficit?
RI 3.8.
Right. So if our bigger deficit is there, then that's where we need to focus our attention. And it's evident that we have in the 20s and 30s in proficiency and on those three components, right? All right, so we agreed that we were going to come back in January, and we did. We met on Tuesday. We even stayed till dinner time, remember? Yep. So anyway, in looking at RI 3.8, when we broke it down and we created that know and show chart, we had some eye-opening moments. We thought originally when it said that the author was just going to make a connection between this sentence or this paragraph and that paragraph, that was enough, right? But the data showed different. So what were some big aha moments or some chunks that we saw in there, Ms. Rozier?
When we really broke it down, what we saw that the kids were really missing and that we need to go back and look at cause and effect, comparisons, and sequencing.
Now that we saw those big things in there, when it was broken down, we know that we want to go back and we want to chunk it because what we did the first time didn't work. We decided as a team to look at the end. And in working backwards, where did we say, what were the 3 tasks that we came up with that we're gonna incorporate from this new piece of text? Ms. B.
Well, we wanted to focus on the sequencing part of that standard. So we're gonna have the students to create a paragraph using those transitional words, and include those 3 major changes that Inuit tribe went through. And another one was the cause and effect, part of that standard. And so the 3 effects on the lifestyle once the Europeans came in to their land. And so they're gonna create a paragraph with the topic and those 3 details. And the last one was the compare and contrasting component. So we want to compare the early life of the Inuit people to their modern life. And we want our students to find the 3 specific details and write about those in a paragraph with a conclusion statement.
And not only that, but we're gonna even give our 3rd graders an option this time. So we're gonna give them those 3 tasks throughout this unit, but we're gonna let them choose. So again, in referencing our data, I spoke of earlier about Classworks. I told you that originally in the fall, we had those 59 3rd graders that were either below or well below. Now it's January. We're working on our universal screener again. So where does the data show that we have our 3rd graders now? How many do we have? Well below or below?
Right now, we're at 24%.
So kudos to 3rd grade, all right? Somebody doing something good. Now, we need to drill down even further, right? So we've got our data points. Now let's look at our action plan and our next steps, because, ultimately, we have to home in on our subgroups. When we look, there are 4 big subgroups at St. Paul's Elementary School. What were they, Ms. B? What were those 4 subgroups?
Students with disability, EL, African American, and Native American.
Right. So we now would be given time for you to go through and look, and I want you to script out exactly where your numbers are for each one of those groups. So we'll fast forward. You've done that. Now, Ms. Rozier, tell me what you saw with your students with disabilities group. Where were your numbers at with them?
So when I broke down for my students with disabilities, I was looking at the number of students that I had, what their average score was going to be, and then out of that, what was the actual ones who were proficient when they looked at that. So with my students with disability, the average score was a little bit below half. That is one of the higher score areas that I have, but the proficiency is not there. The proficiency is much lower than what their average score is.
Okay. How about the EL population overall, Ms. V? What did you see with them?
I saw with my EL population, they were scoring less than half. And, but they were the highest section of proficiency for me, that subgroup.
Right. And yours was around the same, would you say, Ms. Rose?
Yeah, about the same. The proficiency for mine was a little bit lower, but their average score was about the half.
Okay. How about our African American and Native American students? Can you speak to some of that, Ms. V?
Yeah, my African American, I was almost at halfway mark with average scores, but my proficiency was very low.
Very low. Okay. We did have to address that. And the other subgroup, Ms. Rozier, Native Americans?
They are right at the halfway mark and their proficiency matches what their average score is. So they're one of my higher groups for me in proficiency and their average scores, and they do match there.
So now we realize where some of the gaps are here with our subgroups. We've got our data together. Now we've got to figure out now what. What are we going to do? So what are some things that you think we can contribute to some action steps for these subgroups? I'll start with you, Ms. V.
Well, I think we could utilize the assignment section, the class assignment section in Classworks, and focus more on the informational text that's standing in mind of that.
And that's what we can clearly see as one of our deficits, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you come up with, Ms. Rozier, as an action step to help these subgroups?
In 3rd grade, we do use M-Class, and when I go into M-Class, there is a section I can go in there and it has scripted lessons for me to use, and I do like those. And I think I'll use those, we could use those in our small groups, and it's already scripted out there for us to use that with our small groups. And we also have a third grade TA as well.
No, you have a teacher assistant, that's right.
I know, I was so excited for that. I was like,
You mean your boss bought body?
my boss did, she got us all kinds of bodies to help us in that classroom, She sure did.
So what would be the benefit of that TA in the room with this scripted lesson then?
A benefit I was thinking of, especially with some of the proficiency that I'm seeing with my kids, is they need a little bit more of that intervention time. And since with class, I can't get to everybody in the one day, so if I have a TA in there, they get intervention from me, and also that TA in there is that lesson there for her to use. So they're getting more than just one time of intervention with me a week.
Okay, something else as an action step, Ms. V, for those subgroups.
Well, when I was looking at my EL group, just providing that double intervention, since we now have a teacher assistant also in, our EL department.
Oh.
She is offering, she's coming and she's, working with my EL students more now. Getting that double intervention, like Roger said, from me and from, EL department.
And we also have our keys to beginning literacy. You know, we talked about that, and that has a scripted portion of lessons so that we could use with this particular subgroup. So I think we should stamp those out as our action steps. And our plan will be from here to meet back in 2 weeks, and we'll revisit new data that we have accumulated to see if these steps are benefiting our subgroups, because ultimately we know that's.
Good job. Mr. Superintendent, how typical is this?
It is what we are trying to develop in every building with the principal as instructional leader. We're not there, we're gonna get there. These 12 schools, we expect that this is happening in every. We've seen a lot of success, so our intent is to pull every school, the balance of the schools in next year. I do want to ask a question, and Dr. Bullock, you and Amanda and our teachers. So you have more data points now than you've had in the past. And so that definition of data-informed instruction, you have what you need, that becomes a reality, something that you have not had to that degree, be it the common formative assessment, classwork, but you have more data points now to have that type of conversation.
Can I just say a few words? We've had a lot of data. We've had a lot of data. We've not necessarily known how to use the data. And we've never been, and I'm not part of relay training, so what I'm learning, you know, by observing. We've never been explicitly trained on how to have these conversations. And unless you're just a data nerd, you don't, you know, and I would suggest that probably a lot of our principals and even our teachers feel very uncomfortable. They're feeling more comfortable now because this is where we are. And I do think that the other pieces that we have in place, like the common formative assessments, which are new, those are additional data points that are more timely, because outside of that, all we had was the beginning, middle, end, benchmarking, and then end, of course, integrated, you know, tests. And we needed something that was real time so we could take action immediately. And I think because we had the CFAs and now we had the intervention piece with Classworks, I would find it difficult to imagine how people are not having these conversations. But again, I do think that, and I love Miss Amanda. I learned so much from her. I would say she's probably taken this and run with it. And that's the kind of leadership that we need in this district.
At every school.
At every school.
Okay, thank you, Miss Amanda.
Thank you, Dr. Manning.
Don't say thank you to her.
Thank you, Dr. Bullard, I'm sorry.
It's powerful now. Realize we're moving beyond reading the numbers and just looking at the numbers. and now to try to understand the numbers and design around those numbers. That's a major step for us, for all of us, because we're pretty good at reading the numbers, but that was probably the end of it. But now, that next step is, how do I take those numbers? What do they really mean? How do I design around those particular numbers? That's a classic example, right, of what we need, that must happen, because those numbers and understanding move way beyond the principal. Teachers have to own it in the classroom so that we can see that it enhances our PLCs. Those are real conversations about students' needs on and on. But way beyond looking at the numbers, reading the numbers, how do we design, that's an example.
Dr. May, this is when you hear relay, this is relay in action right here.
But if you want to be a superintendent in heaven, you take that example right there and you get it in every school.
Go to heaven.
Anyway,
Dr. May, it's all right if I speak.
yes, ma'am, you can say anything you want to.
Dr. Williamson is doing his best. You know, in the beginning, they wanted to make it a 3-year process, and he's doing his best to make it happen now. So if administrators or anyone comes to you and they say, you know, we're trying to learn this relay, the process that they're putting out there for him is awesome. And, you know, he's even asked Dr. Carr to ask for videos and not. So we are videoing ourselves continuously, are we not, ladies? Do I not have to mash record all the time? So we're willing to share whatever it is so that everybody, and I'm not saying that we're perfect by no means, Dr. Emmanuel, no, we're learning, but we are trying together, and my teachers are working through the struggle together with us. And I know they don't want to speak, but they're putting in a lot of work. When I tell you we stayed till 5:30 Tuesday, and we were planning again today, and the math standard that we broke down, they had no idea that it looked like that before we broke it down. But that's what we had to do. So now they have a different vision on how they're going to attack it next week.
But can we hear from the
Did you know Miss Amanda used to be a curriculum specialist?
Yes. Ms. B?
And yes,
Let's hear from our teachers first. Ms. Rozier, Ms. B?
yes, yes, ma'am. Miss Sandra?
I was just gonna tell you, this summer, when we started relay, I did not like it. It made me more uncomfortable than anything I have ever done in my life. I had to read things from a script, and it just did not feel comfortable to me, but in the end, I liked the script because it made me stick to the script, and by sticking to that script, it makes you stay on time. It makes you stick to what it is you're supposed to be talking about. And that's the result of sticking with that script.
But Miss Sandra,
Stayed on topic.
you're so A personality, that should have all gone your way.
But sticking to that,
Anyway.
It must have been the screen.
It must-
So, right, Sandra?
Well, just,
it was virtual and it was so uncomfortable.
oh, okay.
But Dr. Manning, can we hear from the mind if we hear from the teachers?
Sure, by all means. With the teachers, you want to comment, ladies? And tell us your names again. I didn't quite hear you because your face was turned with the mask when you had said your name.
Okay, so I'm Miss Velasquez, but I'm known as Miss V. Initially, when we were introduced to this, the real-time feedback is kind of uncomfortable at first because she is, like you said, she is in the room and she's right there at you and she's wanting to know, what have you done before this and have you modeled? It was kind of uncomfortable, but now we're kind of used to it. And I mean, I really appreciate real-time feedback. And I feel like it has helped me change my way of teaching. And also as far as the breaking down the standards and actually her being our instructional coach, I mean, it's just awesome. I have never worked for a principal before, and she's just awesome. I've never worked for a principal before that has actually told me what she wants me to do, but also modeled for me and showed me what she wants. And I think I'm speaking in behalf of all of third grade. I actually heard that today in the meeting from one of the other third grade teachers, and I mean, they just really appreciate it. So the I do, we do, you do, awesome. at first I was like, are you kidding me? I gotta go buy a script? I mean, I gotta like have in my, cause you've been teaching for so long, you just go in and you're like, oh yeah, I know how, I got this. But that whole component is awesome in the class. It really does work. The modeling, and then they do it together with a partner, and then they do it independently. And I have seen it be in my class.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next teacher.
My name is Miss Rozier, and I do teach third grade at St. Paul's. I have to agree with Miss B. It's very uncomfortable. I have been teaching for almost 10 years, and I actually work on the relay team with Miss Graham at my school. And it was uncomfortable just because I hate reading from scripts. Initially, I really don't like doing it. And also, I'm one of those teachers, and this is something I had to work on through it, to let my kids just go and work by themselves was very hard for me to do. So it was hard for me to change the way I was doing it. And when the first time she gave me the real-time feedback, she asked me what was my next step, and I had something the kids were gonna do with me. And she asked me, well, when do they get to do it by themselves? And then in my lesson plan, there was no time for them to do it by themselves. So when I actually let them do it, I realized my kids wouldn't do it unless I was actually at the board doing it. Other than that, they were just gonna sit and watch me do it. So over the last couple of months, I've been doing more intentional planning in my lessons of letting them do it by themselves, and my whole team has as well. Giving them more of the kids' time intentionally to do it by themselves. And I've seen my kids become more independent in their learning and in their working. They're relying a little bit less on me than they were at the beginning. And with the standards, again, with Miss V, really breaking it down, there's another fractions we just did today. And it looks like equivalent fractions is very simple, and all I'm supposed to do is draw a model, compare it, and my kids should be done. That is not what that says. NF3 does not say that. There's equivalent fractions, then they have to compose and decompose. There was a whole lot more to that one standard than what we originally thought when we planned our lesson plans. And Ms. Graham's been really great about working with us. She is my third principal, but I've never had a principal not only give me helpful feedback. I've gotten feedback before, but actual feedback that tells me, what can I do different? How can I help my kids? And I didn't feel attacked. I didn't feel like she was trying to get me. She was trying to help me. So I've never had a principal quite like that and help us break down those standards. So I love it, and I love being part of the team and coaching the other teachers, especially our third grade team. So I really think it's worth it.
Madam Chair. Can we stand and
I would tell the superintendent to hire you to work to help teachers. Right.
Dr. Manuel being a curriculum specialist had paid off, didn't it?
Yeah. We already have a teacher shortage, so I think our new Miss Graham would kill me.
Dr. May,
Yes, sir.
make another comment. I'm gonna say training, and I talked about it earlier. The things we've done, and folks, if you've been around long enough, you know it's happened. These ladies here, and Miss Sandra said, when I first saw this, I hated it. How many times have we heard that said about a program that we put in? I don't like it. This thing won't work. It's bad. Let's get rid of it. Training can overcome stuff like that. And that's what's happened here with the ongoing stuff with the principals and stuff. And I'm gonna go back to what we talked about. If you didn't have an assistant principal in every school, these principals couldn't be doing this. We've talked about that. They could not, a place where there's no AP, they could not be leaving school when they have to get this done and then be able to sit down with teachers. Like Dr. Bullard said, we've had data. Data's been around since my prehistoric time, so data's been here. But you would look at it, and then what would you do with it? And sometimes I didn't know what to do with it. But again, I'm gonna go back. When we have a program, and I'm gonna just say this one now, we can't drop the ball and stop the training. That has to continue this year, next year. If you wanna see the full benefits of it, the training has got to continue with everybody. So, I mean, this was fantastic. And is it Miss Graham now?
You just, yeah.
Okay, well, Ms. Graham, now you can, let me know what the compensation is for these teachers. It gotta be something, I mean, I'm just.
You remember how we used to get our notebook, Mr. Bobby and Dr. Clark used to give us our notebook at the beginning of the year with all the data from the previous year, put on the shelf, and that was it. I mean, that's all you done. You didn't know what to do with it. But if I would have had this, and I tell principals all the time, if I would have had this 15 years ago as a beginning principal, wow, what a difference I could have made. And I'll tell people all the time, what a disservice I have done to my teachers, my students, that I had the pleasure of working with every single day, that we could have done so much better if I would have had this training. And that's why next year we're negotiating now for the remaining 24 principals to go through that, the same training. And what a difference you're going to see in this county in the next 2 to 3 years. If we just keep our foot on the pedal, because it is fast paced, but it's going to make a huge impact. So,
Dr. Robert, let's get our agenda back on track here. Wait, let me say something, then you can straighten me out.
okay.
Now, where are we on the agenda? Are you about to go into, because I have a question to get into the 10 instruction strategies. Where are you now on the agenda?
The next point is our 10 powerful.
All right, but I want to say something about something, and then you, Mr. Craig and Mr. Vontae and Mr. Termay say something. And this is about everything we've done tonight. Everything that's been presented tonight is very powerful. Some is required by the state, the standards and all. And my question leading into this, and I hope this is where Dr. Robert's going with this. Everything that there's nothing wrong with what you said and what anybody said tonight, but I'm a lateral entry teacher. Compare it to this. You go to a buffet and you get a plate and everything looks good and you get it all and it all starts running and falling off, okay? You can't put everything on that plate. I'm a lateral entry teacher. All this stuff you all, excuse my language, you said tonight. It's almost causing me to be nauseated. I'm a lateral entry teacher. How in the world, when you all go into a lateral entry teacher, how do you narrow it down and just give me what I need to survive to teach? Narrow me down, it's too much. I'm not saying it's your fault, but how do you narrow it down to keep me from resigning? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and we do have a lot of what we call residency teachers, and we know that they need that extra help, and that's why I am so thankful, and I know the district staff will appreciate this as well. When the board decided to place an academic coach in every school, which you could call a curriculum specialist, you could call a lead teacher, whatever. But that was step number one. So those lateral entry teachers, residency BTs, whatever you want to call them, will have that person right there that they don't have to wait 3 or 4 days before someone can get there. There's an expert right there on that campus. And we've just had these discussions before. That is a must, and that must continue to happen in our district. So I would say that would be step number one, is making sure that we have an academic coach in every school. These are the experts when it comes to the curriculum part. So what they do, they work collaboratively with those academic coaches to make sure that if Principal Graham calls and says, I need additional support, I got 3 beginning teachers that are really struggling, Dr. Locklear or Ms. Freeman, what can you do to help?
Okay, please forgive me for interrupting you. And I agree with that. But I'm talking about, you remember when we started tonight and you all got to showing us all those resources? Remember that? You got to show when Dr. Carr was presenting, all the resources that the state's putting out. You remember that? And you got to show in classwork. In other words, I'm a lateral entry teacher. I really don't know where to start. What do you go in with me? What are our lead teachers or our supervisors? I'm a lateral entry teacher. Talk to me, and I think I'm trying to get into your next part if you follow me.
And that's why that BT program, and if Ms. Thompson wants to join, you know, we are in contact with Beaver, who is, works with our beginning teacher program, Dr. Manuel. So with those teachers quarterly, right, Ms. quarterly. So we provide whatever support, like I said, that she needs, and Supervisor, you can chime in, Ms. Davis, Dr. Hart. But we provide whatever support the school needs. Because we know that we got a lot of teachers that haven't been through any education programs. We know that. They're coming from different professions. So just having the basics, with just dealing with classroom management, just, you know, what are the standards? Where do I find the standards? Just the basic knowledge is what, you know, is what they need help with, you know.
I'm going to say what Dr. Robert mentioned. The first thing you asked was the first thing I need. I need that unpacking document. I need those standards. I need to be able to look at those standards and know my standards as a teacher and have support with that unpacking document, and then reach out for support or get support from my academic supervisor, from my principal, from your academic coach, and then your content supervisor.
So let me, Dr. Manuel. So what they're saying in terms of providing resources, your question is practice. How am I helping? that
Yes,
particular
exactly.
teacher? Let's ask the principal.
That's what she's doing.
So when they were speaking about the academic coach, Dr. Manuel, for the first time ever, there is a person in the building that can physically go to your door and help you in a blink of an eye. She has been given by her supervisor, a designated distinct schedule that says you will work with these new people every week. And she has a time every day if they need it, and if they don't need it, they know they can reach out to her. I had they have one on their grade level that's a brand new teacher, that she has access to a person that can help her with anything from her evaluation process to Classworks, that will go in and hold her hand and has, with in-class assessment, because all this sounds great to her. It sounds great. But she has a person for the first time ever, Dr. Emanuel, that I don't have to email. I don't have to wait for somebody to fill out a form. She's there. She's on site. And when she's not with me going in these rooms, learning from me about relay, she's helping every one of them. And they know she's there. And they will go to her before they'll come to me for the first time ever, because I've never had support like that. There is not a beginning teacher on my campus right now that's ready to leave. Not one, because they have that much support, Dr. Emanuel.
Thank you.
And I want to say to the board, when we had that conversation of, we don't want to get rid of mentors, we want to add to the work so that they can help teachers be successful. We had a lot of conversations, but you supported that. It is making a difference. And we appreciate that. We appreciate that.
Dr. Manuel, just add, and Samantha, I'm sure it was done, these new teachers or whoever, that we don't wait till they ask for help. I think that's very important, especially at the beginning of the year. We don't wait till, a week's time could be too long. We have to go out and say, what do you need? This is how you do this. Got to go meet them and let them know this is the way it's done, and not be waiting for somebody to ask. Because by the time they ask, it could almost be too late. They could be sinking, whatever the case.
So, okay, Dr. Manuel, I'd also like just to bring everybody's attention to what we just saw happen right here. Dr. Williamson talks about the book results now. And one of the things he talks about in there is the buffers. There are things that have kept us from seeing good teaching, acknowledging good teaching, and really coaching people into being good teachers. One of those things is that we have been operating in silos for way too long. We've had for years teachers who teach in classrooms, they teach in their class, and they're only concerned about the kids that are within their four walls. What you saw right here is collaboration. And when you've got beginning teachers at a school like this, where this kind of collaboration is happening, nobody feels alone. The beginning teacher, the veteran teacher, and everybody in between, they are all committed to the same goal, which is student instruction and student achievement. So I can imagine, I can tell you right now that Miss Amanda probably does not have anybody on her staff right now. It might have been different before Christmas, but right now she's got people who bought into that because they know
they've got the support that they need. It might be the teacher across the hall, it might be Miss Amanda from time to time, it might be that academic coach, it could be the assistant principal. There are people on that campus who are vested in developing each other, and that is significantly different than what we've ever had in this district. Significantly different.
Dr. Robert?
And Dr. Bullard mentioned something about Ms. Tyner is, or Ms. Graham, is teachers wanting to stay. And I think I've been to St. Paul's probably about 6, 7, 8 times this year. And when you walk in, you feel it's the perfect place to be. The students, you see the teacher, everybody's just so happy and they're working hard.
They're working
You
hard.
know, even when we done our last walkthrough right before Christmas, Dr. Wendy, you know, it was just a joy to be there. You would think that right before holiday break, it would be chaos, but there was no downtime. It was all actively engaged. The students just, I mean, the teachers were on target, students were on target, and that's what we need to see every single day. If we are going to continue to grow, we cannot let our guards down. You heard me say that. But I just want to echo what's on that list one more time. But if we are not providing those beginning teachers with the support that they need, the academic coaches all the way down to those PLCs and in between, you're going to see more leave, because it does start with the instructional leader of that campus, working with those, helping those teachers, because they recommended them for employment, right? So it's the principal's responsibility to grow those teachers, not to just put them in a space and say you're on your own. There's a lot of support that needs to happen, okay? And then the last thing I want to talk about, Dr. Mannion and board members, are the top 10 when it comes to the instructional strategy for beginning teachers. Because we know when you say essential question, a beginning teacher is not going to understand what you're talking about. You have to break all that down. So we just put some supervisors, if you want to chime in, Mr. Davis, anyone else. Looking at those top 10, really number 10 should be number 1, is student-centered. That's because everything starts with the students, right? But teachers have to understand
What you say?
what those terms mean. And that's why it takes that instructional leader, Graham, to help those teachers to understand. Because Ms. Rozier, you started teaching a few years ago. I remember Ms. Rozier was named Teacher of the Year, you know, but she didn't come in knowing all these terms, right, Ms. Rozier?
Correct.
Exactly, and she had been through a college program and that teacher education program. So you imagine teachers not having any idea what rigorous means, or essential question, or gradual release, or time on tap. That's foreign to them. But it's our responsibility, and that's what we do here at the district, is provide that additional support to help that principal to meet the needs of all of their teachers. Not only the BTs, all teachers, but especially the BTs. That's where we know they need that additional support. That's my time. Graham, you want to say? Okay, any other questions or comments?
There's a Chinese proverb, Robert. Do you know what the Chinese proverb is? And it's referencing modeling. Can you tell me what that Chinese proverb is?
Chinese, now I like Chinese food. Dr. Mack.
Anybody tell us what a Chinese proverb? And it will be similar to modeling.
Show me.
Tell me, and I will what? Remember,
Remember, yes,
show me, and what?
and I'll,
Before you leave, somebody look it up and tell us the right, quick.
I could,
But anyway, I just want to, there's a other part, and I don't have a other, because you've hit on my other. I just want to thank everybody for preparing everything. And it's a known fact that curriculum should be done, the curriculum meetings may be during the day through work sessions, because they are lengthy, because curriculum is the whole reason we have a school system to educate children. You just can't do a curriculum meeting in 1 hour, I'm sorry. And what it is to know the state of the curriculum, what's going on in the school system. It's a very lengthy process, and there's no way you can do a curriculum meeting in an hour. It's not finance. Finance is finite. You did it with 10 numbers, 0 through 9. Curriculum, there are all kind of variables, and you just you can't do it, so.
Changing every day, Doc.
Right, it does, and I appreciate everybody, all the hard work you do, and the superintendent. What is the Chinese proverb?
This is similar to what you're saying. This is what I had always heard. Give a man a fish and you feed him for one day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
That's close. That's close. There's another, show me and what?
Show me and teach me. And
But I think the first one was like, tell me.
I've heard that one too.
In other words, what I'm trying to get to is modeling. I don't care if you're a curriculum specialist, if you're a principal, if you're a supervisor, if you're the high up superintendent and he does it, and if you are the board member, whatever, we need to model. If you're a teacher and you're trying to teach for the children, we have to model what we expect. In other words, model. Now, I know that's how I learn. You can give me, when you get all that mess, you give me a list of instructions, ain't no way. Superintendent, you better show me how to do it. If you show me, I won't forget. So that's what I'm saying, and I think we need to model, especially those that have those positions working with others, those beginning teachers. We need to model how to teach a lesson. That is critical, and I just heard somebody say Amanda modeled something teaching. That is.
We add the second M that we've added,
Yeah.
not only modeling, but monitoring.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be like you when I get younger. Okay,
I got your proverb for you.
what is the proverb, somebody?
I don't know that it's exactly right, but it's tell me and I forget.
There you go, that's it. Stand up and say it again.
Got it.
Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn.
Hey,
Franklin.
thank you, you know what, give me your name and your phone number, no, not your phone number.
Not Chinese.
Superintendent, she needs
I got it from the.
time off,
I bet you.
for Sunday off,
Because it came from that.
Sunday off, baby. Gonna give you Sunday off with pay.
With pay?
Okay, I want to yield to my fellow committee members. Mr. Terry, we can't leave till you say something, make some comments, give us wisdom or something.
I don't know about wisdom, but I appreciate everybody's presentations tonight and comments and everything. It's been very informative. I want to sort of piggyback off of something that Dr. Bullard said earlier about data. And like she said, you know, we've had access to data for a long time, and now it looks like we're moving into utilizing it a little bit more. But that can be problematic, you know, sort of like what Dr. Emanuel said. You know, when you walk in a room, if you're a brand new teacher and you walk in and somebody's talking about MTSS over here and Classworks and just all of these different data sources and, you know, using all these acronyms, it can be overwhelming. So I was wondering, it sounds like we could really use, or we could really, it would be good for us to look into some sort of portal. And Dr., the superintendent may want to look into this. I'm not sure if there's precedence for this in any of the district or whatever, but it would be nice for a teacher to just be able to log into one place and see all of the information related to MTSS, SchoolNet, even Canvas, Google. You know, just click on one student, be able to see sort of a profile of that one individual. And there's ways to make this happen by bringing in all of these data sources into one place. You know, if that's something that we could look into, maybe some sort of data portal and make it a little bit easier for teachers, because, you know, thinking about their workflow, you know, you're trying to manage the classroom, and if you've got to go to this place to find something, over here to find something else, if you've got to go to 3 or 4 different places, and if it's not really being monitored, you know, so what is the advantage to the teacher to do all of that? You know, I'm wondering how much it's going to really be utilized. if we don't make it a little bit easier in terms of their workflow, I think that would be worth looking into.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Vontae, he's our athletic curriculum, everything. Oh, did you all know he's a movie star? Have you been seeing him on TV? Very good, isn't he? You have any comments or words?
Just thank everybody, for the hard work, It's gonna take everybody, board members, the cabinet, and teachers, it's gonna take everybody, with this data, we know where we at, we know where we need to be, and now we're gonna know how we get there without this data stuff, so that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Craig?
I done talked enough, thank you.
And as far as I'm concerned, I really appreciate everything you do. And when I say something, please don't take it wrong. I'm just saying it because I am just a curriculum nut, and I say what's on my mind, and please don't take it personally, but I am very, very concerned about reading. I want our kids to be able to read. I do. And the love of reading is important. It's just as important as the skill of reading. And I now yield to my almighty superintendent after Mr. Roberts says something.
We have one last video that we want to share with you, Dr. Manuel.
Okay,
Before we finish.
he's gonna do the benediction, so, and is it before he does the benediction? This meeting will be adjourned after he does the benediction.
Second.
I make a motion to adjourn after the benediction.
Second.
Okay.
Not even his. Oh, no. Context.
That's it.
Superintendent,
And Wendy's going to give us the context.
What we talked about is that a lot of times we work really hard on something that may be the wrong thing. And so now we're really focusing on the right thing. So this kind of just points we work so hard, now we've got our new direction and we've got where we're headed.
And may the Lord watch over us until we come together again. Thank you.
Amen.
go home.